Good morning, everybody. I'm Susan Howards, a local attorney who focuses on domestic violence in Brookline. Today is a great day in Brookline. It's opening day for the Red Sox. I must say, a little breezy for those of you who are lucky enough to go to the game, but we're delighted that opening day is here because we know spring is on its way. Our show is Brookline Interactive Group's show dedicated to domestic violence. They've carried this show for years, and we're very, very grateful. The content of this show is up to the guest and the host, which means me. And today we have a really, really special guest who not only has personal experience with domestic violence, but can also look at it from afar. Paul Warren. Paul Warren from Brookline. Welcome.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning, and thank you for having me today.
Oh, I'm delighted that you're here. Paul, would you just tell us a little bit about you and your family? And you and your family. That would be great. Just some background.
Sure. First, again, thank you for having me. This is an important subject, domestic violence, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you. I'm married to Amy Evenson. Amy and I have lived in Brookline for a little over 12 years. We have two young children. That one is at the Lawrence School and the other is in Beat, but they'll both be Lawrence School students next year. I have been at home with the children for 9 years. I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad. I traded in my 30-year business career traveling around the world to take care of the children, but I do have that unique background in business. And I also, and we'll touch upon this, but I do have a little bit of a unique path to Brookline. In my early years, I was actually a teenage husband and father, the ripe old age of 17 years old.
Wow.
And if it wasn't for Section 8 housing and safety net services like WIC and Medicaid, I wouldn't be sitting before you, frankly. I would have had a much different path if I did not have that support. And I also have a unique perspective on Brookline. I've been in town meeting for over 4 years. I've served on the advisory committee. I've been an extremely active participant in town meeting, having filed a number of high impact legislation articles that have passed and have had an impact on Brookline. So I'm happy to chat about that and other things that are on your mind, Susan.
Well, Paul, we're delighted to have you here. We're glad that you and Amy and your family are in Brookline and have contributed so much to our town. Can you discuss, do you feel comfortable discussing domestic violence, if there was any in your background or your concerns? And I want you to come up to date. How has the domestic violence response changed from when you were younger to today?
So yes, and as you know, for those that have lived through something like domestic violence, it's a bit of an emotional. I have a lot of time from when that occurred to now, but I come from a large family. There's my parents had, my mother had 6 kids in 7 years, I think is the math. So it was a tight knit group. I'm the 5th boy. I have a sister who's the 6th child. And back in the early 70s, at a time when I don't think there was much support for individuals that were struggling. My mother made the very, very difficult decision to become a single parent with 6 kids. She had not been in the workforce, and she found herself in a situation that was untenable, due to struggles that my dad had, and that created, and those did include, some domestic violence, and that put the family into a very difficult financial situation, which has influenced much of my life and how I think about things. So that situation did occur in my life. It probably contributed to me becoming, frankly, a teenage father and husband. But your question was about domestic violence, what was it like then and services now?
Yeah, Paul, how did public safety response teams assist or not assist you then? And do you see any changes? I'll be very, very honest. In Brookline, we have a fabulous domestic violence team of the Brookline Police. I'm going to put it out there.
Right.
Recently, I had a horrible, horrible case, a Brookline case, and the domestic violence involved mental health challenges, and the Brookline Police, whose zero tolerance record is everybody knows they have zero tolerance. They arrest on the spot. They didn't in this case. They
Right.
de-escalated, they deflected, and the parties separated, came back together and worked it out. So I'm very biased, even as a defense attorney, towards
Right.
our Brookline Police. So now I'm going to let you speak because this is your show.
Right. So, yes, and I try to be I try to be sensitive to my other family members because a lot of this isn't public. But yes, the police department, the public safety officers, the police department was not unfamiliar with my family.
Ooh, I know what that means.
And so, we did have situations where they were present. They prevented situations from getting worse, frankly. And I'm very thankful for that back at that time in my life. And it's one of the reasons why I too am a strong supporter of public safety and their response. I think that we've gotten much better at it. Back then, there was not the knowledge and understanding of how to respond and the importance of services. And people, it was very rare for someone like my mother to take the step to separate herself from what was going on. That was 70s. It wasn't done back then. And importantly, Susan, I also believe that there's services today for individuals that are struggling and find themselves possibly as abusers, is much better today. The services didn't exist back then. It was intervention, but it was more, intervention in order to separate, but not proactive services.
Right.
And I know we've spoken a little bit about some of the services that are available today, but that's critical. I also, believe that, financial situations, economic situations, financial strains, those play a major role, I believe, in domestic violence. And that's why I believe safety net services, support services to help alleviate some of that is really critical to help solve immediate problems, but also prevent future problems.
Paul, I absolutely agree with you. We have come a long way. In the 70s, I don't think the word domestic violence was well known. It was, and I'm going to put in a plug, Bill Weld, who changed the law and put the word domestic violence on the map, thanks to Sarah Buell, a Harvard Law School graduate. I went to hear her right out of law school. I had never heard the word domestic violence, and I grew up in Brookline. Whether I should have or not, I didn't know. So I went to hear Sarah, and I remember her last words, and I use it with every public speech I give. If you have never been abused, consider yourself blessed. I hope we're all blessed. We have great services in Brookline for victims, and we're beginning to get really, really good services for batterers, not jail, not emerge, not these long-term expensive programs, but something, and I think you know about this, a call for change. It's basically a hotline for batterers. If you feel you're going to do something wrong, pick up the phone and they'll walk you through till the moment passes. And anyway, in Brookline, we have so much going on, Paul, and I'm going to jump right in. How do you think the Mass Bay Communities Act, the Coolidge Corner upzoning, and I'll be honest with you, I've attended every meeting that we're invited to. I understand nothing. I don't know what infill is, but how do you think, if it goes through, and I know that some people are trying to redo the guidelines, it will affect the increase in housing, will affect the number of domestic violence cases, or if it doesn't go through and we don't get affordable housing in its place, how will that affect domestic violence?
Yeah, so Susan, it's a great question. And I'm not sure that how to relate increase in housing to domestic violence. I'm not sure if there's something there, but or if there's any data around that. But I will say for your audience, there's a state law. It's called the MBTA Communities Act that was signed into law by the former governor. And that law requires a number of communities, I think there's 177 of them, to build, to rezone areas within their communities near MBTA transit to allow by right multifamily housing, because there's a regional housing crisis. So, by law, each one of these communities, and Brookline is one of those communities, needs to come up with a plan by the end of this year. We potentially could be subject to fines, and the fine would be, in the state's wisdom, they've decided that if a town like Brookline doesn't comply, they actually take money away from the Brookline the housing authority. So they actually penalize the most vulnerable citizens, which doesn't make sense to me at all, but that's what they're doing.
Good point, Paul.
And the
Good.
Attorney General has also communicated that there will be potential lawsuits if communities don't comply. So there really is a big stick that is being used to get communities to comply. So what does that mean for Brookline? That means that by the end of the year, we need to adopt a compliance-based, rezoning for the MBTA Communities Act, and that needs to be done through town meeting. We're a little bit in a unique situation. Town meeting needs to pass that, and in order to pass zoning in town meeting specifically for this particular solution, it's probably going to require a 2/3 vote of town meeting. That's a very high hurdle to pass. So that's what's coming before us. The planning department has come forward with a proposal. They're working on it, which is to make the compliance zone the Harvard Street corridor, so from Brookline Village all the way up to JFK Crossing. And there's, as you can imagine in Brookline, when you start changing things, there's a lot of people that have some concerns.
Paul, what happens if it doesn't pass? And this is a guess on or a hunch. If it doesn't pass at town meeting, does that mean, one, we possibly will be sued, two, that we'll lose money? And are there alternatives to this? Because I know Cambridge and Boston are exempt, and somebody said, well, they already have high density housing. Well, so do we. So do we, Paul.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. So, but let's focus on the question. So, if town meeting does not adopt rezoning of something in Brookline to comply with the law, then we could be subject to monies being held back from the Brookline Housing Authority. That's been estimated to be anywhere between $100,000 and $250,000. That's a lot of money for the Brookline Housing Authority.
Right.
And again, the Attorney General has stated publicly, I believe, that they will work to ensure that communities comply. And then there's another organization of
civil rights, the civil rights.
Yeah, well, there's lawyers. Yeah, there's a lawyers group that has also sent letters to various communities that are not in compliance. Brookline's in compliance because we have till the end of the year to have a plan. But they're also threatening, civil rights, I think, at the federal level, lawsuits against towns if they don't adopt. So there is a lot of pressure. But let me tell you what I think. This is my view on the situation, if that would be helpful. I believe that Brookline should work to comply with the law. There's a law that says we need to do something, and we should make every effort to comply with the law. Currently, there's one proposal, which is the Harvard Street proposal. One of the most significant concerns about the Harvard Street proposal, and actually the MBTA Communities Act, is that you can't require commercial on the first floor. So, Harvard Street.
Oh, what does that mean? I'm sorry. Please explain it, because I really am.
So that's a great question. So I'm sorry.
No, it's me.
I forget that I'm an insider. So what that means is, in our zoning today, we can require in certain areas of the town, that for example, that the first floor of a building, if it's in a commercial area, be commercial. We can require that. And that is meant to help protect and ideally expand our commercial base. And the reason why
Right.
that's important to me and many others is that our residential taxes have been increasing, rapidly. And one way to slow that down is to increase the commercial tax
Mhm.
base.
Okay.
So the MBTA Communities Act, the guidelines that were written by the housing organization department that oversees it, they will not let communities require commercial on the first floor. So that means that, and that's got a lot of people concerned because Harvard Street is one of our main commercial corridors.
Right.
And I can't speculate what can happen, but if you don't require something, you could try to create incentives to get developers to have commercial on the first
Okay.
floor. But there's no guarantee that a developer would do that. So they could instead put parking on the first floor, or they could put housing on the first floor and not commercial. So that's probably the greatest concern that's been raised about the Harvard Street corridors. There's other issues around density.
Right.
And how many residents and how to support those residents. But primarily,
Paul, that's a huge concern. I live right behind Harvard Street.
Yeah.
I'm a senior with limited mobility. I depend on the CVS's, on Trader Joe's, on Booksmith, on all of the moms and pops that we fought so hard to save during COVID. And I'm really panicked. If we lose them, we're losing CVS on the corner of Harvard and Beacon across the street. And I know that the seniors in this neighborhood are, first of all, they don't understand it like I don't understand it. You've helped a lot. If you could explain what the meaning of infill is, I have no idea what that means. But anyway,
Sure,
I think
right.
there's
That's good, great question. And I would also, Susan, encourage, there are, the planning department is hosting community engagement sessions to explain lots of this. And I would just encourage, your listeners and viewers to engage in the process, to become informed. It really is important, and it is a complex subject. So what does infill mean? Infill means that on for example, a lot that may have only one floor of commercial, right? It's a one-story building, and it's only commercial on the first floor. There's an opportunity to infill that lot with additional housing. So putting housing above the commercial space, that's what they mean by infill. So to be able to bring the density of that specific lot up to its potential based on what we zone, that's what they mean by infill.
Okay. And this leads us into the seniors, not just in the Coolidge Corner area, but the seniors in Brookline. What I'm hearing, at least from my neighbors, is they're concerned about the streets, about the bumps in the sidewalks, as am I. I never used to be. I never looked at anything. I just went on my merry way. Now, if I see a tree root that pushes the cement up, I panic. I absolutely panic. So how do you think we can help the seniors? And that leads us to affordable housing. How are we going to increase our affordable housing so people can afford to stay in Brookline? Because it's becoming prohibitive.
Right. So first, you should know, I met with Erin Galentine this week, the Commissioner of Public Works, and we talked at length about the situation with streets and sidewalks and parks and infrastructure. And I think she said to me, I don't want to get this number wrong, so give me a little wiggle room. But I think she said that we have a backlog of about $50 million in infrastructure maintenance that we're behind on, that we don't have funding for. So
wait, could you say that again? That we don't have the money to do it?
So Brookline has not, we have been underfunding street sidewalk maintenance, roadways, by about $2.5 million per year for quite some time. And so my understanding is we're in the tens of millions of dollars behind on deferred maintenance. And so that's why people are saying the roads are bumpy. That, it's like some roads, it's like driving across the surface of the moon. But let's talk specifically about seniors, right? Why, my mother-in-law is, lives around the corner. She walks to our house, on a regular basis. And, there are some hazards on the way. So seniors are at least 20% of our population. By some estimates, it could grow 25 to 30%, up to 25 to 30%. We spend 1/4 of 1% of our budget on seniors in Brookline. So the senior center gets, Council on Aging gets 0.25%. That's a pretty serious problem in my view. And I support us actually bringing together a group of individuals that have experience and expertise in this area, including seniors, to start looking at the types of services that are needed as our senior population grows, and actually is in place today, because we don't know where the gaps are, and I believe we need a plan in order to be able to support our seniors going forward. The other thing is, if you look at boards and commissions in Brookline, very rarely do you see many seniors represented on those boards and commissions. And
Good point. Good point, Paul.
we do a good job at providing representation from other groups. We need to do more, certainly with groups. But in my view, and having conversations with many aging adults, we don't really center decision making or through the lens of aging seniors. So take a park, for example, when we rebuild or redo a park, what are we thinking about and how that park might support seniors? We had a lengthy discussion about, possibly using part of the override to fund scholarships for youth for recreation. Well, I would say, I think that's a good idea. I was funded that way as a kid, but those funds should also be centered around seniors as well for recreation
Thank
opportunities.
You.
So
yep.
we need, the seniors and aging adults are an important part of our community. They have made, and they continue to make significant contributions to Brookline, to our school system, to our libraries, and frankly, we need to make sure that they're engaged and that they're involved in our community, because they have so much to offer, and frankly, we have so much to be thankful that they've been involved for so long.
Oh, Paul, that would be great. And if you know of any commissions or any groups that are being established, please count me in.
Okay.
A year ago, I wouldn't have thought I had much to offer, but since I have now this titanium leg, and mobility has become a huge issue for me, and thank God I live near Harvard Street, I would love to participate, and I know a lot of people in the Harvard Street area would. And
well,
speaking
Susan,
of schools,
Susan, I will say briefly on that, there is an operating override on the ballot. And part of that operating override, I think there's $2 or $2.5 million included, I believe, for the DPW for roads and sidewalks.
Good.
And that's important, because we need to be able to ensure, safe transit on sidewalks for everybody, including our seniors.
Especially since many of them do not have cars. They do rely on whatever we want to call public transportation. And I know we're having issues with the T, that it takes 10 days to get to Kenmore Square from Coolidge Corner, a bit of an exaggeration.
Right.
But I wonder, let's just segue into the schools, since you mentioned the word school.
Yep.
The Pierce School project,
yes,
the redo, is, I would say, at the minimum controversial. Not to me. I'm a former school teacher. I'm totally in favor of it. These kids deserve a healthy environment. They shouldn't pay for the mistakes of the adults in funding and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how much bullying, domestic violence, anything else that goes on at the Pierce School, because I hear rave reviews of the staff and the teachers. And that's also the school that has the highest test scores, even though it's probably the worst environment in the world for anybody, not just kids. So what is your view on the Pierce School project? And do you know of any bullying, harassment, anything unusual going on? You might not.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I haven't heard any type of those situations, but
good.
Certainly, again, I connect economic situations, financial situations, to potentially causing issues around domestic violence and others. That type of burden can be a real problem. But with respect to the Pierce School, so as I told you, I grew up in Arlington. I went to the Ottoson Junior High for my 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. It was a school very much in keeping like Pierce School, the Pierce School. It was an open concept, open classroom school. And this was a theory of education that was developed and became popular in the late 60s and 70s. And we built all these schools with basically auditoriums out of cement and no walls, no hallways.
Right.
I was in school with 3-foot bookcases. It was a disastrous educational experience for me. Today, if I was a kid, they probably would put me on an IEP and maybe a diagnosis. I was probably had some attention issues when I was younger, and it was a disastrous educational experience for me, and almost set me up for failure for high school. It was really not good. So when I walk into the Pierce School, and I would encourage anybody to go watch. There's a video on the Yes Campaign's website of the principal giving you a tour, or you could actually go and physically go through. Everybody that's gone through there is shocked.
Shocked.
Shocked is the right word. Shocked at the situation, not only because of how the school is configured as open classrooms, and you can just it really is very problematic. Right. It's also not ADA compliant.
Right.
So if you're a child has any type of disability, they can't go to that school if they have mobility issues, or if they, let's say they break their leg playing soccer. You can't get to the playground. The bridge is stairs, right, to get over to the playground. So right. This school is really not in keeping with Brookline's values for an equitable, accessible education for all children. And it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's
a lot.
210 million. But
212 million, I think. Right.
What's that?
I think it's 212, but don't quote me.
Well, 212. Well, there's 2 million that was already used as part of like the investigation. So that's like sunk money, and every project has that. But whatever you want to call it, 210 or 212. Part of we're getting $38 million reimbursed. For building that, if we approve the school. If we don't approve the school,
what happens? What happens?
Well, one, that $38 million goes away, right? It's given to somebody else, and there's no guarantee that we would be able to get funds in the future. We quite possible, but there's no guarantees. There's $38 million on the table to help us build the school. So the taxpayer, it's still a lot of money. It's like 172 million, right? 172 or 174. So it's really not
right. It is a lot of money for all of us, even the supporters.
It certainly is.
But it's more money if we don't do it, because these kids are really going to suffer health-wise, education-wise.
It means that we wait for, and I'm a business guy. I also think financially, the costs for this to do the school are not going to go down. They're only going to go up. I mean, look at inflation, look at the cost of materials, look at the cost of labor. Interest rates are going up. I don't believe it gets cheaper. So, to start over, I don't make sense. So I'm all in on supporting the Pierce School. But I'll tell you, I hear from lots of folks, especially seniors, are saying that the tax increase is a tremendous burden. Well, Newton has done an amazing job at maximizing abatements for seniors, tax abatements, trash and refuse fees abatements, water and sewage abatements, and other ways. And I think that we need to be able to do 2 things at once. We need to be able to continue to grow our infrastructure and to meet the needs of our community, a diverse community, at the same time that we help to make our community affordable for those who are strained. And we can do that both with seniors by looking at maximizing and increasing by petitioning the state legislature to increase the amounts that seniors can deduct, but also affordable housing, which I know that's the next thing you want to go into.
Well, and this is what with us today is Paul Warren. Go ahead, go into affordable housing, because that's a huge issue for all of us, whether we own or whether we rent. Right.
So, and as I mentioned at the beginning, if it wasn't for income restricted housing, what I benefit from in particular was Section 8 housing, I would not be sitting in front of you today. It allowed me to be educated and go to college. And if I didn't have that support, I literally would not be sitting before you today. So there's a couple of different issues that are going on within Brookline. You know, our land values are so high right now, and it's such an attractive location because we're so close to Boston, and we've got great schools. People want to come here. So we are starting to see, Susan, I know you've seen this probably in your neck of the woods, we're starting to see an increase in the conversion of our quote unquote moderately priced housing, which will be the 2 and 3 families that are older housing stock. Those units are being purchased, and often those are rentals, right? It may be owner occupied and it's rental. Those units are being purchased and redeveloped, and they're being redeveloped into luxury housing. So we're taking something that was moderately priced, and now we're turning it into a $2.5 to $3 million condominium. And that is deeply troubling for many that are concerned about affordability and making Brookline much more expensive and frankly gentrifying. We're rapidly becoming a community of wealthy and poor. And you know, I just recently met with 50 firefighters, the firefighters union, for something else. And you know, I was speaking with them, and I asked them to raise their hands about how many lived in Brookline. Of the 54 raised their hands. And I think that's common with the teachers and the police. So
and police
So what do we do about this? I'm a strong proponent of increasing the amount of income restricted housing in Brookline, deeded income restricted housing. And the way that we can do that is it's through something called inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning is regulations that we have that say if a developer is building a building, then they have the option of building affordable units on site, or they could write a check to the town of Brookline and let the town use that money to build the unit somewhere else. I'd like to see some changes in our inclusionary zoning regulations to actually require more deeded income restricted housing built while we're actually building apartment buildings, especially through this MBTA Communities Act, so that we can have more affordable housing. You can't leave it to developers,
right,
out of the goodness of their heart, to build affordable housing. They just won't do it. They're going to maximize.
They won't do it. Right.
You got to plan for what you want.
That's a good line, and it's a good way for us to end in the last minute. Paul, is there anything we haven't discussed? I have one question, but I won't bring it up today because I hope you'll come back. And that you would like to put out to our viewers, and also how can people reach you? This has been an amazing discussion, and I'll say one thing: all of the issues that Paul Warren has discussed have an impact on the rate of domestic violence, sexual harassment, bullying in our schools, in our seniors, with all of us. Every single, they may not be direct, but indirectly, domestic violence will be heard. The term domestic violence will be heard with all of these stressors. Anything you'd like our viewers to know or to hear about, Paul?
Right, and of course, Susan, you know that domestic violence cuts across all income, social economic situations, race, class. It is prevalent throughout all communities. I guess the one thing I would say is that Brookline is going through significant change. We are being asked, we're being pressured, and our needs of our community are saying that we need to grow. The important thing is that I believe Brookline should grow based on how the community wants it to grow and its vision for its future. So there is something that's underway. It's called the comprehensive planning process. And I'm a strong supporter that we need community-based input to figure out where, when, and how we're going to grow to meet the needs of our community. Seniors, middle income, low income, and students. Because without a plan, we are just leaving it to chance what Brookline's future will look like in 100 years. So with that, people can reach out to me. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 1. I do have a website. It's paulwarren.org. So my name.org. And up there, you can find out about me and get my email address and my phone number. My phone number, and I love to talk to people, is 617-869-5430. That's my cell phone. I usually always pick it up. If not, I call you back pretty soon. So, Susan, with that, I'm very grateful for you inviting me. And
No, we're grateful, Paul. You've given us so much time and you've touched on so many issues. Paul Warren, thank you. And thank you for being so intricately involved in our community, whatever direction we go in. I think we're in good hands with you speaking up and speaking out. Thank you again, Paul Warren. That's it for the Safety Net. This is Susan Howards. Thank you, Adam Sayre. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Good opening day for the Sox. That's what's important today.